This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we are going to take a look at aggregate functions using the over clause. And with our aggregate function, we have our over, and then we're specifying a partition by clause that we use, and that could be a field or fields. And then we can also use an optional order by clause. If we look at a specific example here, we have a query that is essentially going to go out and get some additional data for our invoice number, our invoice date, and our invoice total, and then go ahead and do our aggregate functions and using our invoice date. So in each case, we have our invoice total and not partitioning by the same field. We can partition by the same field, but we don't have to. And this is going to give us the date total. We have the date count, and then we have the invoice date average as well. So ways that we can do this, if we go to our SQL Server Management Studio and scroll up to the top, we're going to use this as our starting query. So I'm going to come down here and paste it in, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we want to do. So we want to get the count of the employees that are in a department with retrieving the department's name and then also the group name for that department. So we're going to try to bring back some additional information that when we were doing just our aggregate functions, we either needed to use a group by or we couldn't necessarily return the extra data. But in this case, when we're using our over with our partition by, it's going to allow us to provide our aggregate function and return some additional data. So let's go ahead and at least structure our query with our join, execute it, see what it looks like before we put in that aggregate function. Make sure everything's working. So we're going to start with our department ID, and this is going to be from the Human Resources Employee Department History table. We want to join another table in, so we're going to add our alias for this. And the table that we're going to join to with an inner join is our Human Resources .department table. And we'll alias this as D, and we need to join those two tables on our department ID. So this is going to be edh.department ID is going to be joined to the d.department ID. So when those two fields match, we have a join condition. We also want to bring in our department name that's coming out of our department table, and then the group name, which is also coming out of that department table. If I execute the query, I can see that I'm getting a lot of duplicates. I have like 4 tool designs, I have 7 engineering, and it's essentially returning a row for each of those department ID, tool design, etc. And I want to really get a distinct list. So this should minimize that down to 1 record per department. Now that I have that, I can go ahead and put in my totals. And again, I want to do a count. And this is going to be on my business entity ID. So I can put in my edh.business entity ID. And I want to do this over partitioning by my edh.department ID. And we can call this maybe department emp count. And I can go ahead and execute this query. And we can see that we are getting 7 back for engineering. That's the number of rows that we saw. We saw that we had 4 rows for a tool count. So it's giving us back the number of employees that we have in each of the departments with additional data, like the name and the group name. Now, if we go ahead and switch over to Oracle, we can see that it pretty much is going to work the same. I'm going to start with this query. I'm going to get rid of my grouping here. And in this case, I have my order items. Let's go ahead and make this OI. And we're getting our product ID and the quantity from our order items, but we also want to join in our products table so that we can pick up our product name and the unit price. So let's go ahead and do the join. This is inner join on products. Give it an alias of P. This is going to be on the OI.product ID equal to the P.product ID. Then we can go ahead and add in our product name from the products table, along with the unit price from the products table. We have our sum, and we want to move this to the next line because we need to put in our over clause, and this is going to be partition by our OI.product ID. Now if we execute this, I'm going to just scroll down so I can select everything. We'll see that we are going to get multiple rows for product ID 2. So we need to go in and add our distinct here. Once we do that, then we are going to get back a record for the product ID along with some of the additional information like the product name and the unit price, as well as the actual total. And we probably want to make this the product quantity. And let's go ahead and re-execute that so we have a nice looking query result set coming back. So at this point, we are done with our aggregate functions and we are going to move on to subqueries.